What's up guys, I'm Josh and welcome to my video on making Dexter's Lab realistic and maybe a bit boring with VFX. A quickish breakdown of the process and workflow behind my Dexter's Lab animations. This definitely isn't a tutorial because I know I did quite a lot of things either totally wrong or a very slow and weird way. So where this project started was with something I do far too often, watching cartoons. And after I got the idea for some realistic-ish Dexter's Lab animations, I decided it was time for even more watching cartoons. But this time as research. But thankfully I definitely didn't get distracted and end up watching almost every episode, and I certainly didn't download a Game Boy Advance emulator and finally complete Dexter's Lab Disaster Strikes. But after that careful, very thoughtful research, I had a better idea of the scenes I wanted to build and how I'd approach the characters. I started with Dexter and knew I was going to make everyone a little bit older than they are in the original show, so started mapping out the shape, height and proportions, while also looking for an outfit. I used Real Illusion's Character Creator, which basically turns making 3D models into the character creation section from the start of a video game. You do almost all of the work with simple sliders that can affect everything from the height and body shape to smaller details like nose size and face wrinkles. After searching the store for a sort of sciencey lab coat outfit, I eventually found this chef's costume that I figured could work well with a few tweaks. So after building the foundation of the character, I added the hair, glasses and gloves, getting a bit closer to the finished product. For the last phase, I exported the model from Character Creator and opened him in Blender, and there I sculpted in a few details by hand. Well, digital hand, I guess. I made the nose a bit pointier, his chin a bit softer, refined some things like the sleeves and removed one strip of the buttons so it looked more accurate to Dexter's design. I made him some new rounder glasses from scratch and altered his hair a bit more. From there, all that was left to do was change the textures and colours for things like the hair, clothes, buttons and gloves, which I did pretty quickly either in Blender or in Photoshop, and that was Dexter done. I think the detail I like the most about Dexter is his glasses. I replaced the plain glass that I originally had with this sort of hologram blue tech glass material from Kitbash 3D, and I think they make his glasses feel more modern and sort of techy. Something sort of like VR or AR glasses, or like Iron Man's from the MCU, but most importantly it makes the glass blue, which is like the original cartoon. A big part of building Dexter and getting to a design I was happy with was finding this balance between realism and the original show. I applied those same principles to Mandark and to Dee Dee. I spent a long time trying to make Dee Dee. I tried making her look like Dexter, but slimmer, taller, with a bigger head, so she ended up looking nothing like him, which I guess is accurate to the show, but I still don't think I'm too happy with her design, which is why she's only in the background of one animation, and in this render that I didn't even finish or post because I think she looks a bit creepy. After those main characters were finished, it was time to move on to making some actual scenes. The first full scene I built was the CloneMatic, where Dexter clones himself, which I know looks nothing like the actual cartoon, but I wanted to show off as much as possible in one quick scene. So I made the clothing machine, where the doors open and a Dexter walks out every so often. Then I put the main Dexter in his little experiment station, typing away at something. I set up the fusion reactor in the far background, and lastly some characters to walk by in the sort of middle background. The back wall is actually part of some like lunar station that I just flipped on the side and flattened a little bit. And finding the right look really came in from just sort of combining a bunch of different things but making the colours consistent. I rendered everything out in different layers so that I could alter how often people walked past in the background and how many clones there were manually after the rendering was done. After I timed everything out, I added in some extra effects like sparks, motion blur, and a little bit of camera shake. It's made up of loads of layers of robot noises, background machines, a microwave ding, and lots of other different sounds to get that final result. These extra effects and the audio took a bit of refining so that the whole thing could loop over and over again, as I made all of these animations perfect-ish loops so they all end exactly where they started. But after all that was put together, it was good to go. Before I really knew how I was going to use the giant robots, I started making them because they're such a key part of Dexter's lab. The designs I ended up with are probably one of the best examples of how I took the inspiration from the cartoon but updated it and made it realistic. For the Robo Dexter 2000, you have really no idea how many times I've typed Robo Dexter 2000 in the last few weeks. I wanted to have the same elements, so a blocky design, the blue glasses, eyes, visor type thing, and to follow the same colours. I ended up using a bunch of parts mainly from the Kitbash 3D Spaceships kit to build the various sections of both robots. Like everything from Kitbash 3D, the parts are pretty much plug in and go, ready to use assets. And even though it was still quite a lot of resizing, reshaping, flipping, mirroring and retexturing to get everything to work, and that does sound a lot, but it really wasn't too much work. And there were a few parts that just sort of made immediate sense, like the heads for both robots. And I think I ended up with a solid, realistic take on Dexter's robot. I mean the Robo Dexter 2000. For the Mandark bot, I wanted to stick to the original design as well and keep in mind that it should be slimmer, taller and more rounded, and much less blocky than Dexter's to mirror the differences between the characters. For both designs, I spent a bunch of time trying to make them into something that looked like it could work practically. There was lots of gears and mechanisms, sort of like something from the Transformers movies, but the look just ended up being a bit over-designed and complicated, so I scaled it back and just used the same parts over and over again throughout each of the robots' designs. And that same idea applied to the colours. Keeping just a few textures repeated throughout the design not only helped feel like the original cartoon, but made them feel a bit more real than some earlier versions that had where there was loads of different materials. I quite quickly decided that although in the cartoon Mandark and Dexter are usually inside their giant robots, to try and show both robots with the characters inside their heads during a fight in a relatively simple animation that had to loop would be a bit too challenging. I instead made it so that Dexter and Mandark were remotely controlling their robots from a sort of observation platform looking down on a giant robot arena. Like the previous scene, the arena is built from a few different kits with the colours changed to match my sort of style guide for the lab. Dexter and Mandark have an edited version of the same animation, which is the pre-made real illusion animation of someone playing a video game that I changed a bit here and there, flipped it so they weren't both sat in the exact same position, and altered it so that it ends back where it started, so they can just sort of move and shake around forever. They've both got these little hover chairs. They're actually the same chair, but their colours match their robots. And in that same sort of style, I put together these very over-the-top remote controls. I just loosely attach those controls to the hands with some subtle movements to sort of look like they're controlling something with them, but you can never actually see them pressing any buttons or anything because their hands don't really move. For the robots, I had a fair bit of trouble with the animation for a few different reasons. The first was being a bit too ambitious and wanting it to be a really over-the-top fight with crazy moves and flips and part of the walls exploding and blowing up, which I did a few attempts of, but it was just not getting where I wanted it to. Making it loop was proving to be a bit of an issue, and the render times would have taken weeks. For the fight moves, I combined a bunch of different parts in Real Illusion's iClone and just built out a few different sequences. There's actually 3 fight sequences that all reset to this same starting position. I did this so that any fight move can be repeated over and over pretty seamlessly, but I can also put them together in any combination and make a continuous, much longer fight. Like with almost all of my projects, I ended up with a few problems, fixed them, rendered it out again, found some more problems, so I fixed them and rendered it out again, and then I found some more problems, so I fixed them and rendered it out again, only to find some more problems. Anyway, I eventually got there with this scene, or close enough anyway. It was helped massively by adding this screen effect in between the foreground and the background, and having text show up. This mostly happens at some of the parts I'm not too happy with to cover up some of the issues. I spent quite a while adding the 2D elements onto the scene, like the sparks, scratches, some smoke here and there, and a few random things like this small section where there's a sort of Iron Man blast. Here I had a punch that I'd made way too far apart in the build, so thought of this as a way to hide it. Then I added in lots of robot and destruction noises, Mandark and Dexter sort of grunting while they're pushing buttons, noises for the screen, and it was good to go. I applied those same techniques and ideas to the last animated loop, which is Dexter working on the Robo Dexter 2000. Overall, this was a really fun project to put together that ended up being way more work than I anticipated, but I'm pretty happy with how everything ended up. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. Although, like I said, I feel like I barely know what I'm talking about. And for more projects like Realistic Dexter's Lab and breakdowns like this, be sure to like and subscribe.